and buttons. Let's get this going. So, really hot topic at the moment, obviously, in a period of uncertainty, great uncertainty in our sector, for a number of years on an absolutely fundamental part of our fire strategy for tall residential buildings. And it's been a period where we've had a kind of series of drip feed updates, but actually perhaps not that much detail. And in combination with a kind of lack of detail in the drip feed, it's clear that there's lots of different opinions from project teams, fire engineers, client base, and some real key industry stakeholders like NFCC and Fire and Rescue Service. And we've all been challenged over the last year to kind of take a view, get on, or we just all stop. So today's bite size in this update is some reflection and comment on the recent ADB 2024 amendments and flag some points of debate and some watch points that we think are still of interest and still relevant. So we run what we call a bite-sized program at PRP. It's we try to hit them sort of weekly. We've got about 150 of our team online, typically, talking about subjects like this, and it's about sharing experience around business. Today, I hope sharing experience with valued clients, but please not too many awkward questions, to inform better discussion, better decision making, and how we manage risk and progress on our projects. Just a quick qualification. Today, just focusing on residential purpose group 1A, so I'm talking about flats and live work units rather than considering different purpose groups. And I guess our decisions need to be made on a project by project basis. So whilst we've got schematics and general guidance and some project examples, ultimately each project's got to be assessed on its own merits. So in terms of the format for today, I'm Scott Sanderson. For anybody I haven't yet met, I'm going to cover a little bit about the kind of recent context, a run through on the 2024 amendments, some thoughts on schematic design, which is really just to kind of illustrate those amendments in practice and the impact they have over and above the current baseline, and then some watch points. And then I'm going to pass to Richard, who's going to look at it more from a kind of capital D design perspective in terms of options, perhaps some emerging consensus around layout design, and some observations, particularly I think around resident experience and quality. And then hopefully we've got a bit of time for a discussion. So alongside Rich and myself, we have Andrew Mellor, and unfortunately actually Naomi's not able to join us today, but Andrew and Naomi have both been involved working with DLUC on the impact assessment and consultation for the changes to 2 stairs. And alongside Andrew and Naomi, we have Mo Fisher, who's a technical standard auditor at PRP. Mo sees a huge number of our schemes, so we take all of our schemes, particularly the taller buildings, through an internal review process, and Mo is seeing that project information, centralising it, help us understand how the market is moving and responding to these issues, and very, very knowledgeable. Alongside Mo, we have Peter Childers, who's got a building surveying background, and Peter is on the drafting committee for 9991, and that's really helpful and keeps us informed of what that group is doing and their direction of travel on important guidance. So just to highlight, difficult questions go to the right-hand side of this group, and we'll get in. So the context. So I think it's just worth reflecting briefly on the 2 stairs timeline. So it was first, I guess, flagged that there was changes coming in August 2022. DLUC sent a circular letter out to local authorities and other bodies challenging the use of single stairs on very tall buildings. And it was interesting to pick up the use of the phrase very tall, because it's the same language that's used to describe a 50-metre plus building in BS 9991. So I think it was obvious and clear that very tall buildings were going to be challenged. When the consultation was launched, December 2022, that dropped that sort of potential trigger height to 30 metres, and that was the suggested height for consultation review for the threshold for a single stair. July 23, there was a statement reflecting the consultation, or the outcome of the consultation, that 2 stairs would apply on new multi-occupancy residential buildings over 18 metres, so it would have dropped to 18. In October 2023, we got some guidance on the transitioning arrangements, so 30 months from a date, but at that point, no date given. In February, we had our first clear view that the guidance would be published before the end of March, and indeed it was. And we're now talking about the statutory guidance published at the back end of March 2024, and those are the 2024 amendments to approved document B. So that's the 2 stairs timeline. Excuse me. I think the wider context is just important to recognise for design teams and projects managing design development. It's a pretty fluid environment over the last number of years post-Grenfell, for obvious and important reasons, progressive development and evolution of the fire safety guidance in England, and this recent update represents the 6th substantial update to the approved documents. And I'll not go through the specific amendments, but you'll see the evolution and the response to many of the issues present in Grenfell and more widely seen in our sector, and more probably still to come. The wider context, I mentioned BS 991, Fire Safety and Design Management and Use of Residential Buildings, is absolutely key document. I think very robust and detailed guidance, and important that it carries quite a lot of information that's not present in the approved document. So for example, there's guidance on extended travel distance, there's much more information on smoke control, and there's provisions for open plan flats, which is not present in the approved document. So important and central guidance, and heavily used, particularly for our very tall buildings. As you will know, I'm sure, 991 is under ongoing consultation. A draft was published in 2021, and that's been kind of relied on, I think, as a point of reference for teams trying to look over the horizon to what's coming. The 2021 consultation draft recommends 2 stairs above 18 metres, recommends, and makes provision to continue to accept a single stair in the 18 metre to 30 metre height band, provided that other criteria is met, including pressurisation of the stair. And there was much more and better guidance on evacuation lifts in an annex to 991, which I think, in my view, kind of is helpful, expansive, and still stands. So a key document for us to keep an eye on. Now, as other updates have shifted and moved, 991 has kind of got stuck from my perspective, or certainly publication date stalling. It's still to be confirmed, as I understand, but it is expected that it will be published in 2024. We expect that the further amendments to 991 will pull it in line with ADB, so in particular perhaps to omit the option to maintain a single stair in that 18 to 30 metre height band. And again, we expect that we will see a refinement and perhaps more information on evacuation lifts and smoke control, which would be very, very welcome. Right, I guess I need to also flag some inputs and commentary from the NFCC, the National Fire Chiefs Council. So in December of 2022, they published what was called a position statement, which was a really robust call for 2 stairs from 18 metres, and bear in mind that was at a point where DLUC were just about to launch a consultation at 30, so I think important and influential in the sector, and a call in that document for a duty to respond, quote, to the Fire and Rescue Service comments, so that engagement process, perhaps with Gateway 1, there might be a deeper obligation on teams to at least respond to, if not take account of, the inputs from the Fire and Rescue Service. In February 2024, NFCC published an opinion paper, and again, kind of interesting timing in relation to updates from my HSE on building regs, I think, from my perspective, a helpful document in that it puts meat on the bones. There's a lot of explanation around kind of the reasoning and calls, the reasoning from the NFCC around a number of the sort of features in design that they've been calling for example, provision of lifts, independent lobbies, etc., etc. So that document kind of takes you through their justification, which I think is helpful even if you don't fully subscribe to the features that they're requesting. What I think is quite interesting about the NFCC document, even this year, that document was sort of published as an authoritative statement. We are seeing impact on projects, and we've got at least 2 projects in our London studio where the fire engineers are picking up the full recommendations of the NFCC document on buildings at 11, just above 11 metres, and pushing that into the design, even though the guidance is pushed for taller buildings. But you're just into that discussion of judgment calls and debate about what best practice and safety looks like. So to talk specifically about the amendments, and I'll bullet point some of the key provisions. So I guess the kind of obvious start point is that we have more than one common stair to be provided in blocks of flats with a story 18 metres more in height. And common stair, which is important language, not necessarily firefighting stair, it's a common stair. Evacuation lifts. There are a number of provisions to support the use of evacuation lifts, but there is not an absolute requirement in the ADB for evacuation lifts. So this is an important distinction for any clients here whose work portfolio straddles London and other regions. So for example, in London, the provisions of the London plan apply, and we are required to have evacuation lists, but it's not necessarily the case in other parts of the country. So while the ADB amends to kind of accommodate and make provision, it's not a requirement. Where an evacuation lift is provided, it needs to have an evacuation lift lobby, and that lobby itself provides the refuge, and it's got to be adequately sized to do so. Smoke control. There's some further guidance, but it's limited on smoke control systems, and essentially provisions to make sure that the stair is protected to the same standard. So the lobby and stair is protected. So the lobby and corridor is protected to the same standard as a stair. So whilst there isn't detailed guidance on smoke control systems, perhaps unlike 9991, AEB is beginning to respond to provide more information on smoke control. And lobbies, important guidance, particularly when placed in contrast to the NFCC position, and that is permitted to pass through a protected lobby to reach an alternative exit. And to, I guess to be clear, that is lobbies in series, so pass through one lobby to another as opposed to needing to have the ability to access each lobby independently. And that has an enormous impact on space planning for cores, and Richard will cover this in a bit more detail on somewhere else. I think just important to pick up a shift on terminology. So 2 clicks here. This is table 3.1 from the previous AEB, so it's 2022 amendments at the top versus 2024 amendments at the bottom, and see the introduction of the phrase story exit. So this is story exit being a final exit with doorway that gives direct access to protected stair, evacuation lift lobby within an evacuation shaft, the firefighting lobby or external escape route. So our critical distances on typical residential floor plate. So from flat, what might have been from flat to stair door, is now flat to story exit, which is really important, and with these sort of important language and detail picked up in strategy drawings and indeed in strategy documents. Right, the transitionary arrangements. So, as had been flagged last year, they are actually what seems to be sort of reasonably generous, depending on your point of view, and perhaps sensible, depending on your point of view, transition arrangements. So for clarity, the new amendments take effect from the 3rd of September 2026 for use in England. I might read this bit verbatim, so it's not good. But the current amendments, which is ADB 2019 edition incorporating 2020 and 22 amendments, will continue to apply where a building notice or an initial notice has been given to, or a building control approval application with full plans made to the relevant authority before 30th September 2026. And either the building work to which it relates is either A, it's started and is sufficiently progressed before that day, or B, is started and sufficiently progressed within the period of 18 months beginning on that day. So until the 30th September 2026, the current basis for the assessment of a design submitted to building control or an application for building control approval is the 2022 amendments rather than the 2024 amendments, albeit those projects are now designing with 2024 in mind before they knew what it looked like. And building work is regarded as being sufficiently progressed if basically started pouring permanent foundations, or started piling, or if it's work on an existing building, if it's started that work, or if it's a change of use, you've started the work which will constitute a change of use. So again, I think a bit like the Building Safety Act implementation, there's a management piece about managing design development and controlling your basis of design, so the regulations against your design relative to given application dates. And teams will need to watch that. So I guess there's a couple of questions which follow. How will project teams secure feedback on new guidance if applications will be assessed against the 22 amendments until September 2026? So I guess to clarify, one might be submitting an application for building control approval with 2 stairs and your view on what go with 2 stairs, but the team that you're interacting with, consulting with, are baselining the 2022 amendments. So we shall see where that goes. And then there was a really quite interesting note in Michael Gove's announcement from February 2024, where it was clearly stated the revised guidance, i.e. last month's updates, will not be exhaustive. The design of each high-rise building will receive individual scrutiny at Gateway 1 and Gateway 2 by fire safety professionals, via the building safety regulator. We need to be satisfied that the final fire safety provisions are appropriate to the requirements of each individual building. So I guess as with everything else we're doing in and around the subject of safety, it's going to be a clear view, a clear strategy, properly documented, visible and presented, so that we have that discussion interaction as we consult and as we submit for approvals. So, schematic design is how does this translate in practice? And I guess just to start with baseline. So this is what I'm calling the pre-amendments, ADB baseline, so the clarity 2019 edition with 2020 and 2022 amends. And for just ease of illustration, picking an 18-metre plus building outside of London, so not requiring an evacuation lift. So we've a firefighting shaft with a firefighting lift and firefighting stair. We don't need an evacuation shaft, as I said, and we don't need a second stair. We've got restricted travel distances within corridors under ADB to 7.5 metres. Unventilated corridor spaces are permitted, provided that we protect the staircase with a ventilated lobby. And of course, there's a variant on this where these doors can both be emitted, provided we maintain 7.5 metre travel distance from the flat to the stair. We can still have natural smoke control in the form of an AOV shaft, and we locate electrical risers outside of that stair and lift lobby. So let's say that's a kind of current base case before the discussion on 2 stairs and certainly before the 2024 amendments. So to demonstrate why that varies, think about an 18-metre plus building in London, so applying the 2024 ADB amendments and bringing in an evacuation lift. So we've still got firefighting lift and stair. We have an evacuation shaft consisting of an evacuation lift lobby, protected common stair. Notionally for means of escape only, but obviously could be flexible in terms of day-to-day use, and a minimum of 1100 width, we would say. We still have restricted travel distances within corridors at 7.5 metres to the storey exit. ventilated corridors as per the amends. Now, natural ventilation is still permitted under the ADB amends, but certainly we're seeing a strong swing towards mechanical smoke control for all those spaces in order that the design and performance of those spaces can be justified by calculation. And typically what that means is smoke shafts, both for extract and intake in each of those spaces. And again, electrical risers staying clear of the lobbies. We are seeing on a number of projects kind of variant on that, so if we kind of flip between the two, here we've got supply and extract in each corridor, supply and extract, and then the kind of variant is supply in the lobby and extract from the corridor, reverse the doors, and those doors are either pulling open when the fans are operating, so it's got to be finely balanced, or there's dampers in the doors. And there's a number of schemes pursuing this on the advice of engineers. Again, just to illustrate a different block form, I think that's a cluster core, I would say, is still the dominant block form, but certainly we have linear blocks on a number of sites. So in this case, the base case is 18 metres plus, it's in London again, so we've got evacuation lift and important point floor area not exceeding 900 metres squared. So that 900 metres squared is the trigger measurement for provision of a second firefighting shaft. So we do have a number of schemes that just kind of sit in this band. In fact, I'm sure Richard might show one in a bit. So we've got firefighting shaft, firefighting lift, evacuation lift, and evacuation lift lobby. We've got restricted travel distances within the dead-end corridors, so that's again at 700 metres. The central corridor, we restrict travel distances to 15 metres, and then we need to vent the corridors, and again that would typically be using a mechanical smoke control system, and again we're keeping the electrical risers clear of those spaces. So, some thoughts on watch points. So height measurement, I was trying to think on the train way in. We must have, there's at least 4 or 5 critical height measurement criteria now benchmarked on 18 metres, which is sort of the magic number. But when we're considering the 2024 ADB amendments and the measurement threshold for provision of the second stair, it's measured to the lowest ground level in accordance with diagram D6, which you will appreciate is aligned with the measurement criteria and definition of a higher risk building and HRB. However, the height for a firefighting shaft is measured from the fire service access level, which is a critical distinction, and therefore it's potentially the case that you could need a second stair but not have a firefighting shaft, and we've already identified a couple of projects in our team that actually hit that, rather perhaps slightly unfortunate threshold or banding where that can apply. So, and I guess in my opinion, given that the stair is about safe and adequate access, leaving the building, it seems to me that the relevant measurement threshold in my view should be the exit level rather than the ground level and or the brigade service access level. But anyway, that's what's published. I think chatting prior to the talk, lots of people here, including myself, are still concerned about getting the number of lifts in the building correct. So NFCC opinion is basically taking you to evacuation lift and firefighting lift for each stair. So if you have 2 stairs, it's minimum 4 lifts, perhaps as this example. But for lots of very good reasons, not least viability, deliverability, there's got to be a conversation about what's the sensible and appropriate provision, particularly on a tighter footprint, and perhaps particularly as we have been over the last 18 months or so, when we're effectively retrofitting this additional facility into a consented design within constraints of a viability plan. So I say all of that, I have to acknowledge, I think there is a valid question on resilience of lift service, and it seems to me that our fire strategy should have a plan, should make a positive statement and provide a positive response to the scenario that a lift is out of action. And that might be something on dual functionality, so we've got lifts that can function as firefighting lifts and or evacuation lifts, and just sort of good planning for how spaces work. So if we have protected lobby that can act as a refuge, is that not adequate for the scenario to provide protection in the event of a fire, and especially considering you've got the brigade there managing the situation potentially. Over the last couple of months, particularly following the October 23, the full implementation of the Building Safety Act, there's been a lot of head scratching around diagrams like this, and I'm thinking kind of what is a project, what is a building? If I've got my Building Safety Act hat on, this is a building, connected structure, shared structure. If we're looking at this from an HRB procedures perspective, or indeed a Regulation 7.2 combustible materials perspective, we'd be applying a single consistent specification of the whole of that building. And it kind of raises the question, does the same logic flow with regard to stairs? Because the amendments aren't clear one way or the other, and hopefully this is something that can be clarified. But what ADB says, and I'll not read these out verbatim, what ADB says is it makes provisions for definition of compartment walls between buildings. So for a compartment wall to separate a building, it's got to be continuous and vertical. You can't rely on a floor to separate buildings, so if you kind of got mixed uses or basements that kind of slot in underneath residential parts, they're not separate buildings under ADB. So I guess the concern is, or the question is maybe more than the concern, if this is diagrammatically what the configuration of stairs might have looked like under the 2022 amendments, when you go to the 2024 amendments, I think we all say and acknowledge, yes, you've got that additional stair in the 7-story part, but I think there's a really important question to box off around additional stairs in the other parts that, depending on your viewpoint, you might consider are part of that same building. So it's potentially a rather unhelpful kind of merging of guidance that's something to do with, well, not something, guidance that's for HRBs versus guidance that's for the approved document. Now, pondering this, we took soundings from 3 fire engineers this week, and we got 2 different answers on this, not massively surprising. And as I'm sure many clients here will appreciate, there's actually quite a lot of complexity in terms of separation of stairs, particularly separating tall residential stairs from stairs to basements. That's going to get blended in with this discussion. So we need to here run a bit of a back sweep and check our position on some of our multi-block schemes. I'm sure clients here will have the same thought that we did when this was published. I think one area we'd be particularly, as Mo was pointing out, there's a set of frequently asked questions published in relation to the ADB amendments that hopefully will be updated, and it would be really, really helpful if this point in particular could be clarified one way or the other, so that teams know what they're heading for. So with that, I shall hand over to Richard.
Thanks, Scott. I'm going to try and avoid acronyms. If everybody's kept up with all those, I think it'll be a cheat sheet. There's a lot of terms that it's hard to keep up with. I think the biggest challenge we've had throughout this entire process has been the impact on schemes, viability, program, design decisions, and ultimately what's the end product that we're delivering, and is it going to be the right product in terms of safety, but also resident and user experience. And it's been quite a journey, so I'm going to cover a few of the things we showed last time, and then show some examples of how they've changed. So, in basic terms, 18 metres up to 6 stories, depending on the ground level, and 30 metres up to 10 stories. And the reason 30 is there is because then we start to go into other detail. And And at one point we were looking at whether it was going to be 30, it's now 18, so there's absolutely no doubt there. What is a building? Scott just talked about individual blocks and where is it relative to the ground. Really important when we're looking at early stage design and really understanding that impact. We've got schemes which are on very steep sides, changing levels, and it might change the way we approach the architecture. It means we have to separate buildings properly to actually make them more viable and more deliverable. And then the different situations we're working within, we've got existing outline planning permissions. That might be a full detail, it might be an outline where you've got building depths and forms, which works previously, but the minute you put a second stair in, it really hurts your efficiency. And we've been through lots of processes on lots of schemes where I've got to say that planning authorities have been pretty flexible and understanding the impacts and showing some sense in allowing amendments under delegated powers. But it is a challenge and it does affect the way you lay out schemes. And then we've had buildings starting on site. Do we make the change? Do they stop piling? They've already piled. What are we doing to fix that? And then we've got live design projects and feasibilities, and there's multiple clients in this room where we've been sort of saying we should allow for more lifts just in case, but it really hurts the viability of the scheme, and therefore whether the scheme maybe happens, whether you buy the site, whether you move forwards on the site. And all of this has been occurring in a market where build confidence inflation has gone through the roof, values haven't changed, so schemes are getting squeezed in the middle, and there's a lot of questions. We did look at interlocking stairs. I think one good or clear update at least is that it's not accepted. So we looked at options of interlocking stairs and the challenges around that, the biggest one being legibility of when you come up on a different floor, the door opens in a different place to the floor below because of the interlocking nature of that stair. So we were looking at colour coding the stairs so people understood, but it doesn't work if you're colourblind. And also it still has that question of what door to go to and the fire brigade are coming out in a different place, but they've been quite clear on that. I found this, I remembered this from when I was younger, so I got to play, which is from the film Splash. And for some reason it stuck in my mind when we started talking about this, where he's trying to get to a lift as quick as possible, and he's trying to judge which one to go to. Now, a lot of the diagrams we've just seen, the lifts are separated by doors. So what's that user experience of when you go to get your lift and it's being slow, and we all hate waiting for a lift, we're very impatient. You can't tell whether the other one's sat there waiting, and you haven't got that option and choice, so how can we look at that impact on a daily basis when that door is only needed in an emergency? So can we look at hold open doors? I can envisage doors being left open, propped open with a fire extinguisher, which would just be the wrong thing. So how we actually move through that design experience is going to be quite important. I think cluster core arrangements still feel correct. You know, it gives structural stability, it's the most efficient use of the building form, so you optimise the external facade for residential accommodation and windows. We all know how hard these buildings need to work, but it does affect building efficiency and service distribution. You know, we can't run electrical cables through protected lobbies unless they're in fireproof conducts, which can be done. But also we can end up with lots of different shafts, and shafts take space, but if it's more passive, it's a better decision to have passive solutions rather than mechanical. These things all need to be thought about and tested financially as well. If you're a long-term asset holder, you've got servicing, you've got management and maintenance of that. If you're a building owner, even if it's if you're not actually managing it, you've still got responsibilities. So there's big decisions in the whole life cost of the scheme that can be made or need to be made early on, and it will affect different tenures and different types of accommodation. I've talked about the sort of user experience, but it's not just on a typical floor plate, and I think we've all got very focused on a typical floor. When you get to ground level, this can really mess up your layout. And we've been through a process where we've ended up with corridors all over the place, protracted routes, no access and connection to other parts of the building because you needed clear routes out. You know, at one time there was a real push for accessing your bins internally. So you come downstairs in the drying, put your bin in the bin store. You take your bikes to a secure lobby, to a secure bike store. at one point we were being pushed away from that. Everything has to be outside, no connection with the inside. That started to change, and we've got clearer guidance on that, which I'll pick up on. But we're still getting conflicting advice from different consultants at different stages on the journey. Access to car parking, basements, and also podium car parking, and then also rooftop amenity. You know, a lot of our schemes, we're really working sites and density, and we're trying to maximise views and amenity and access to sunlight. So how does that affect your measurements as well? If you've got an accessible terrace, taking a story off your height if you're staying below 18 metres. And then also the amount of plant that's going on the roofs. We've now got things like air source heat pumps, we can have lots of extract fans and other bits. It all has an effect, and it affects where you have taller buildings overlooking smaller buildings as well, what's that affects. And we're trying to get as much PV and biodiverse roofs. Everything's working quite hard, so you need to look at everything in the round. We've had lots of schemes. This is a very dense regen of an existing estate where some of the buildings had to be quite compact in their footprint to facilitate phasing, and this had a single stair, and we had to fit in a second stair scenario. One thing we've learned from all this testing is generally if you need to put in a second stair into a building that only has a single stair, you're going to lose 2 bed spaces per floor. So a 1 bed, 2 person goes to a studio times 2, or a 2 bed goes to a 1 bed. So that's kind of a very crude impact. What we've actually done in most cases, we've actually managed to grow the building slightly. You add about 450 mil to 2 sides of the building, which is 2 bricks. That gives you that area back. So that's the discussion we've been having with planners. It's meant we've had to sort of push some of the overlooking distances slightly below thresholds, but it's been the best way of protecting valuable accommodation for residents and people, whilst achieving the safety recommendations. And there's lots of metrics that kind of flow with these, but they're the kind of 2 take-homes I would say in terms of footprint. We've looked at lots of alternatives. So this is a typical cluster core, 8 homes per floor with 1 stair. This is the scenario where we add a second stair. Very similar to the diagrams Scott was showing earlier. This was done beforehand. And you see the efficiency ratio, which a lot of people start with as a base metric of efficiency, goes from 81.4% to 79.4%. And this doesn't necessarily have the latest ventilation requirements as well. If we separate a separate lobby for the stair, but keep an open flow through, it drops to 77.3. And if we have 2 separate stairs at either end, with potential for 2 lifts in 2 places, arguably you only need 3, that drops to, well that's at 78.6. But it allows a clearer route through, and also potentially a better user experience where you have 2 lifts, and this might be your main stair for the building, and the other one starts to form that function of an evacuation stair. If we have the sort of cluster core arrangement, which Scott was showing, which gives you, with a centralised route there, we're at 82%. If we have alternative means of escape, so if you're in this, come out of your home here, you can go to that lobby. If that lobby is compromised, you can go to that lobby. You've got choice. This is what the fire brigade want. This isn't what the guidance is saying. The guidance is saying you can do this, which is through one lobby to another lobby. But the fire brigade's point of view is, if you're fighting a fire from the floor below, you're propping open all those doors with the hose, and therefore you're compromising the smoke into that shaft, which means you have to go through a smoke-filled space to get to the safe space. In theory, though, most of the people have already left the building. Hopefully they've all left the building, and you're just dealing with that particular floor with breathing apparatus. But that's essentially the crux of the matter, is that choice of worst-case scenario. And if a stair's blocked, or if a door's been propped open by a fire extinguisher and compromised, you've got alternatives. This is the same arrangement with 3 lifts. So 1 stair has 2 lifts, which might be your primary circulation, and 1 stair has 1 lift. So you start to flex that, which is your key route. Now, the one problem with this is if you're waiting for your lift here, if you're Tom Hanks, you can't tell that that lift's sat there waiting for you. So it's that sort of experience of going from one to the other. And when you're looking at journey, lift times, etc., it starts to impact, on a taller building, your user experience. It might be that you start to say, well, the residents on this side use that side, the residents on this side use that side. But you're limiting the options. And if you've got two people coming out at the same time, you haven't got that option. Or if one lift is broken, you don't know that the other lift's working. It's those kind of daily elements. And this is kind of the ultimate of where the fire brigade is trying to get to, where you have 2 lifts per stair, so 4 lifts. So if you've got an escape lift and a firefighting lift on 2 sides. But that just does seem like overkill. And obviously the cost implication to that, not just in construction, but management and maintenance, is substantial in a very challenging market. If this building is 50 stories, it's a different discussion. And then also we looked at the efficiency of the same sort of arrangements, but if you introduce 10 homes per floor rather than 8, and this is something we're doing a lot of on schemes where you have smaller home typologies. The GLA and the head planner for the GLA, we had a meeting where the officer was really pushing back on 10 homes per floor rather than 8, and I was saying, look, it's the same number of bed spaces, actually it's 1 less person per floor on the mix. No, be pragmatic, and the head of planning said, look, we've never refused a scheme because of this and those numbers. So whilst it's set there in its guidance, we have to propose the right logical solutions and not be afraid to challenge them. Otherwise we won't have viable schemes and we won't have safe schemes. So I think with all of this we have to really challenge ourselves, each other, and also the authorities we're dealing with to actually say what is the best solution to these schemes. The big impact on these though is dual aspects, and we're often really being pushed on dual aspects. It's become a very easy stick to beat developments with, but it's about the right types of homes and the right type of aspects, not just having 100% dual aspects. If this is a tower where you're not relying on openable windows for ventilation, the dual aspects doesn't really matter the same. And with the noise requirements we're having with FLOSS and a lot of urban locations, you don't get the benefit of dual aspects if you can't rely on opening the windows. Jenny's looking at me with a smile. It's safe to say, not quite true, Richard. We have looked at 100% dual aspect solutions, and there's been emerging typologies. This would provide 100% dual aspect. It has 4 lifts, 2 stairs, complete optional routes around, but it's at 73.9% efficiency. And this was kind of where we were starting, at the start of this journey, trying to find solutions. And we've kind of worked these through to really say this is the kind of ultimate solution, but it's a different form of building to what we've been looking at before, and it's quite chunky. So this whole thing about elegance of buildings and towers, this only really works for very tall buildings. Or you start to accept that buildings form are changing slightly, and we actually allow for slightly more bulky buildings. But this would achieve everybody's criteria, but it comes at a cost. That has been sort of refined and evolved in sort of Peter here. This is our Dagenham Green scheme, where we have 2 stairs, 2 lifts, lobbies which you hopefully could see the other lift being there. There's a door here, and I think this door should be on a hold open, which is only released in emergency. So you have that traditional user experience of a lobby, and then you go left or right to either side. So you've got essentially 4 homes per floor in a dedicated stair and lift scenario, and it's 100% dual aspect, and it's 70% efficient, 77% efficient, which I think is pretty good going, and it's working very hard. This point about stairs though, and doors, and the number of doors you have to go through to get home, I think it's really important to the resident experience. With most of these situations, you could end up going through 4 to 5 doors before you get into your home, which is a lot. And if we think of the Oz Friends scheme, you try moving a sofa in through all of that, and try and navigate it around all these doors. Or if you're shopping, or you've got a pram, that's a lot of doors to get through before you get home, and they're probably going to be fire doors and restricted, and they're not going to be easy. Ground floor of that same building, we have a entrance lobby, so we're still getting that sense of arrival. And then we can move through into that space, and again, if that can be on a hold open, it becomes much better. And then we have a dedicated escape route from this stair. And we're actually getting a lot of comments from some consultants saying, oh, you need to have a dedicated escape route that isn't affected by a lobby or anything else from both stairs. You don't, you only need it from one. And that's quite important, because otherwise your ground floor is going to be really challenging. But what it does mean often is we've got extra corridors. This building, fortunately, we can go in one side and out the other. If we couldn't, say there was something this side, we'd have to be running a stair through, a corridor from here through. So you've then got two entrances on the same side. One's an escape route, one's your main entrance. And when this scheme is on site, being constructed, all of the ancillary spaces, so your bike stores, your bin stores, are all accessed externally. So, you know, if you've got a bike, and we've tried to do some good things where you can enter here under this covered area, you know, there's some smart moves that the team have done on this. But this was at a time where it was a sort of no, you can't bring that through. You are having to get out of your building to get to these spaces. This scheme has just gone into planning with Barclays, and this is quite an interesting case study, because this has been developed throughout the duration of these regulations emerging, and Barclays took a very strong view that they did not have the time or the appetite or the money, because of programme on delivery, to go back to planning if we don't get it right. And they had to get a reserve matters in within a time frame, or else their overall master plan consent would expire. So they've gone for 3 lifts, which gives the 2 lifts on one side, so user experience, and 1 lift on the other side, and complete option for escape. So you go one or the other. So they've taken a very un-Barclay-esque decision to really go what is the best solution, not the most economical. And I say that tongue-in-cheek, because they know what, you know, they are very good at what they do as builders and developers, and they don't make these sorts of decisions lightly. They really test the efficiency and the value of that. But that's the decision they've made on this scheme, which I think is a brilliant thing for the scheme, because it's completely future-proof. At the end of the day, they could decide not to put one of these lifts in if it's not required, and therefore use that for plant or something else. But this gives complete sort of utopia for the fire brigade. I suppose they probably want next year. This would give them everything they need. And it gives 50% dual aspect on 8 homes per floor footprint. And it achieves 77.7% net to gross, which is pretty good going, I think, for that sort of solution. Ground floor, we have main lobby in to the 2 lifts, and then escape route straight out, which can link through there. This main entrance route also provides access to the bin stores and to the underground car parking and bikes. So you've got back that sort of being able to come inside and go to all those dry spaces. The post room is in its own space, so we have lobbied posts, so it's not compromising that lobby. And then all the other areas are, as you'd imagine, with ventilation. That same approach has been taken to the other plots, and on this we were working within Reserve Matters Permission, where we had limited building widths. We also had the Elizabeth line running along, so we couldn't make the buildings any flatter, because it comes right up to this edge. So this was a very tight block, where we have a centralised circulation, and then the same approach, but on the sides. And this is only achieving 70%, but it's only 5 homes per floor. And if they were 8 per floor, which it could be, or bigger homes, that efficiency would go up. But as a user experience, you've got the 2 lifts into 1 corridor. So you're really minimising the number of doors you're passing through to get to your home, and it's pretty compact. Ground floor, again, we have lobby from the park side and escape direct out from both stairs available, and access to all of your internal ancillary spaces. Finally, on that scheme, we have a very long linear building, and we've looked at a huge number of options on this, including cluster cores with dual aspect homes linking here, but the efficiency was just not working to the optimum. So this building footprint is over 900 square metres, which Scott was pointing out earlier, so we have to have the extra evacuation lifts. And we have essentially 2 traditional cores linked all the way through. And then we're actually at 10 homes per floor on this footprint. We're only at 30% dual aspect because it's right next to that block we just looked at, but it's the nature of that site. They are east-west facing homes, and we've done things to inset balconies and other bits for solar shading, etc. But it's achieving 77.7% net to gross. So it feels to me that the sort of 77 mark is the kind of new 80 in sort of old money on efficiency, but you do have to work really hard to get that right, and you do need to really think about the steps along the way, of, you know, as a user, how that's working through. Ground floor on this building, because we've got a main road and a park, we've got through lobbies to give access from both sides, and then we've got from that lobby you go into your core either side up the building, and then you've got escape routes straight out as well. And all the ancillary spaces are accessed from those internal spaces. So the resident experience, and this is an affordable building, I should point out as well. It's working hard, but it's given all the right sort of elements for your daily use. I mean, hopefully these doors will never get used. You know, these buildings are sprinklered. We have all the new measures and non-combustible materials. Hopefully a fire never happens, and therefore all of those doors are actually just a daily pain for most residents. They're very important, but we have to really think about the use of it, because otherwise people will damage them. They'll take them off the hinges, they'll break them. They're the things that went wrong in the past because they weren't maintained. We have to really understand some of those elements when we're looking at buildings, and in some cases, when we design a block, not be afraid to say, right, we need to start again. We need to look at a different strategy because it's not working. And you know, we've done a lot of work as a practice. The teams have been so impressive at embracing the detail. You know, Scott's presentation covers so much of that detail in a very short space of time. There's a lot more to it, and there's a journey we've been through, but everybody really understanding the push and pull levers, because one thing affects the other, is quite important. And you know, working with people like yourselves in the room, the cost implications of that and the program implications and the value-based decisions, we all need to work together to actually come up with the right thing, and it's not just necessarily the quick solution works. So very happy to take questions and pass them on to the other guys.